to Legacy Her Way. Hi, I'm Tanya Hendrix, and this is the first official episode of a podcast whose mission has really been near and dear to my heart for years. That is supporting women and giving women value. Before we dive in, I want to start with a simple truth. Every woman is building a legacy. Whether she knows it or not, whether she feels ready or not, whether she's building it through her business, her family, her faith, or her fight to survive the hard things, she's building something that will outlast her. This podcast is about doing those things, building that legacy on purpose. It's about building legacy your way. But first, who am I? A little bit about me. So I am an estate planning attorney in Huntsville, Alabama, but that's just what I do. It's not why I do it. So let's give you a little more background. I'm a former prosecutor, a criminal defense attorney, former criminal defense attorney. I'm a certified mediator, a published author, a bonus mom, a wife, a business owner, and a woman who has spent more than 20 years fighting for people, especially women and children, who have been abused, sexually assaulted, raped, and are trafficked. I became a lawyer to help abused women and children. That calling has taken many forms, from the courtroom to the streets of cities where I helped trafficking victims, to a safe house where I lived with survivors for 6 months. I volunteered with missing persons organizations, trained law enforcement, and fought for justice in ways most people will never see. And I carry those stories and those faces with me every single day. One young woman's face I'll never forget. I saw her on a street corner in Miami in 2010. This was 4 days before the New Orleans Saints beat the Indianapolis Colts in Super Bowl 44 at Sun Life Stadium in Miami. She was my first quote-unquote prostitute to see. It was around 11 p.m., and she was standing in a dim yellow hue of a streetlight on a street corner in Little Haiti in Miami, against the darkness of an empty lot behind her and a dark, dead-end street to her left. I was sitting shotgun in a black Audi. The driver was someone I just met that evening during a training session to prepare us for going out and on this mission to offer assistance to women that we saw on the streets, young women we saw on the streets. So I just met him probably an hour or two before. And so as he pulled up next to this young woman, I rolled down my window and I asked her, "Do you want help out of the life?" She said, "What?" At which time I repeated myself, "Do you want help out of the life?" She then shrugged her shoulders, tears welled up in her eyes, and she shook her head no. I handed her just a little trinket with a phone number on it and told her to call if she wanted help. I saw a tear at that point fall down her cheek. And then out of the corner of my eye, I saw a grown man riding a child-sized bicycle across the street. Based on our training that we just had, we knew that this man was to look out for her pimp. So we knew our time there was up. We could be, in danger, but more importantly, she will be the one punished if we stayed any longer, because her time is money to them. And if she is not making money, she's costing them money. And her spending time talking to us is costing them money, which could in turn endanger her life and her health. So we knew our time was up. It was time to leave. So we left and we drove about 4 blocks down the road, turned around, drove back past the corner where she had just been standing, and she wasn't there. This young woman, who couldn't have been more than 18 years old, was gone. And as we passed by and I saw that she wasn't there, I couldn't help but think of her and what horror she and her body must be going through at that moment. And over the next 3 days and nights that we were in Miami and we were on these different missions, reaching out to potential victims, I would see more victims on the streets of Miami. One of them looked like she wasn't more than 12 years old. And there's one young woman whose meal I bought at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I sat there at the booth and I talked to her until we were able to get a team member to take her to a safe house. In the summer of 2009, I started learning about human trafficking. So I learned that missing kids often become trafficked kids. I was connected in 2009 to a group called KlaasKids Foundation. They're a nationwide, at the time, they were a nationwide search organization for missing and trafficked children. KlaasKids was founded by Mark Klaas, the father of Polly Klaas, who was abducted, missing for a couple of months, and then found murdered. Mark started the organization to fill the gap between what law enforcement did to search for missing children and what parents could do. And as a volunteer for KlaasKids, I walked through fields, swamps, brush, and forest looking for missing children and adults. It was my work with KlaasKids that I learned about domestic minor sex trafficking. As a volunteer, I traveled to multiple Super Bowl host cities to search for missing and trafficked children. I walked the streets. I monitored online for trafficked children. And just as an aside, do not try this at home. This can be dangerous work. Let the professionals handle this as far as trying to look for missing and exploited children and reaching out to them to offer help. Leave that to the professionals. But it was with KlaasKids Foundation that I was in Miami in 2010. That was my first Super Bowl. And that just lit a fire. When I saw that young woman on the street corner and I saw her gone, literally 4 blocks down the road and 4 blocks back, she was gone. It lit a fire in me. And I knew that I had to help these victims. I knew that these victims, these women, needed my help. So I kept volunteering with KlaasKids. I'm still having my law practice going. So I kept volunteering. And then in 2013, I shut down my law practice in Foley to work with sex trafficking victims full-time at a safe house for sex trafficking victims in Birmingham. My 3 dogs and I moved in and lived with the women in the safe house for 6 months. That was interesting. But that experience taught me much about these women, their lives, and their struggles. It gave me greater insight into sex trafficking in America. And again, their faces are with me still. I still can see their faces. I hear their stories. And I know their stories. And their stories remain in me. So it gave me that greater insight into their struggles. It gave me greater insight into how they became victims to begin with. And so from that, I just learned a tremendous amount. But that's not where it all started. It actually started back in college at the University of Alabama in the fall of 1994. I knew when I went to college I was going to go to law school. I became an attorney to help abused women and children. But at 18 years old, in 1994 I was 18, at that age, all I could think about was helping these victims as a prosecutor. That was my limited thinking. Like, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to go to law school, and the only way I knew at that time of how I was going to help victims was as a prosecutor. And I did that for a few years. I was very successful. I prosecuted a lot of very bad people. And then I went into private practice and learned there are other ways to help abused women and children. As a family law attorney, I had the opportunity to represent victims in protection from abuse matters, ensure that child support was paid, and I helped domestic violence victims divorce their abusive spouses, and I represented vulnerable children. I had the opportunity to represent dads trying to protect their children from an abusive mom, or from a mom who is experiencing or exposing her children to predators. Little did I know that in 2006, a custody case where I was representing the father involving unmarried parents would actually foreshadow my work with missing kids. See, I didn't get started working with missing kids until 2009. But in 2006, I had this case in which my client, which is the father, was awarded relief against the mother who was withholding the child from him. The day after he was given some relief, the mother took off with the child and didn't know where she was. We had to work through the court system, work through local law enforcement, but there's one particular investigator who just went above and beyond to help this father find his little girl. And he used, at that time, it was new technology, again, 2006, new technology of cell phone tower pings. He was one of the first ones to use it, at least in our area of the country. But he used this new technology to help locate her. And through his tireless efforts, this little girl was recovered and returned to her father. It took us a few days, but my client got his little girl back. When I began volunteering with KlaasKids in 2009, I learned that investigator had become a lead trainer for law enforcement on missing children, and he used that case as a teaching point. So kind of a full circle moment at that point. In 2021, so I had a law practice and Foley until 2013. I had started working with trafficking victims in 2009. In 2013, I closed my law practice, lived in Birmingham at the Safe House for sex trafficking victims for a while. Then I left there and got to start practicing law again. And I ended up in Huntsville in 2017 to work for a divorce law firm. In 2021, I transitioned to full-time estate planning after the unexpected loss of my uncle. And what I saw, maybe it aggravated me, it frustrated me, because I watched as my 87-year-old grandmother and my mother struggled with the overwhelm, the chaos, and the burden of an intestate estate. An intestate estate is when someone dies without a will. And when that happens, it just creates a mess. So everything has to go through the probate court to get permission to do anything. And then everything just takes a lot longer. There's more frustration. There's more cost involved. So I grew frustrated watching my grandmother and mother navigate creditor letters, probate court, dealing with the taxes, dealing with bank accounts, cleaning out his house, going to his employer to get last paycheck, watching the mail for creditor letters, running around town to wrap up business meeting with a realtor for the house. I mean, there's just so many things that were involved, much of which could have been avoided with just a little bit of planning. So had my uncle done just a little bit, he could have saved my grandmother from this tremendous burden with having to deal with his estate for him because he did not plan. So instead of her just mourning the loss of her youngest son, she was stressed, overwhelmed, and burdened with wading through the muck of an intestate estate. So after transitioning to full-time estate planning in 2021, I realized there's more to estate planning than just merely preparing documents. So when I had my law practice in Foley, I did quote-unquote estate planning, but it was just wills and powers of attorney. I didn't do much more than that because I just saw estate planning as transactional. I saw estate planning as being, just give me your documents. But after I transferred to full-time estate planning in 2021, I realized there was more to it. So estate planning is actually a comprehensive approach that looks at who and what is important to a person. And then you develop a legal strategy for that person and for the benefit of them what they love. Because, I mean, when you pass away, you're not doing estate planning for you. You're going to be dead. You're doing estate planning for those who you love. So you're always thinking about those who you love, whether it's family or non-family members. So estate planning is about protecting those you love from the unnecessary stress and fear. You want to provide them with that peace of mind in the event of your incapacity or death. Now, I realized that my lifelong desire, after I started doing estate planning full time, I realized that my lifelong desire to protect children actually aligns with estate planning because through proper estate planning, children can be protected and can be provided for. Parents can name guardians for children and designate family members from whom the children should have not. There are some people you don't want your kids around. In your estate planning, you can say, I don't want my kids around that person. So when you do your own estate plan, you are able to fully protect your children as best as you can. So parents who make their estate plans can actually provide their children with stability, assurance, and peace. And to me, someone who has always wanted to protect children, that is a protection. To be able to provide that to your children, that, guardianship provisions and ensuring their stability and peace, and trying to steer away from any danger. Because if you leave it to the state, if you don't have a plan, a judge has to decide where kids go, not you. So a significant part of my legacy, as a estate planning lawyer, and this podcast, you hear legacy. So this podcast is a legacy her way. A significant part of my legacy is my heart and passion for helping abused women and children, sexual assault victims, and trafficking victims. I have spent my entire adult life volunteering and supporting these groups in some way. And because of that passion, I implemented programs within my estate planning practice to protect children and provide parents with safety tips. I have what I call the Little Legacy Guardian Plan, where I get to give practical tools for use when an emergency arises and children need to be quickly placed with trusted friends or family, and resources if a child goes missing. Designating guardians for minor children in estate planning documents is the minimum a parent can do to protect and guard their children's futures. So now, through my estate planning firm, Huntsville Estate Planning Lawyer, and through my writing, and now this podcast, I help people plan for what matters most. And I help women in ways my 18-year-old self in 1994 could have never imagined. I mean, in 1994, I was 18. Again, my thought was, I'll be a prosecutor. But now, 23 years after I got my law degree, 23 and a half years after I got my law degree, actually, you know what? We're at 24 years. Yeah, we're 24 years after my law degree. I have helped victims, not just women, but there are a lot of male victims too. I've helped victims in ways I could have never imagined. And that is a significant part of my legacy that I'm very excited about and very proud of, because I have helped people pick up the pieces. I have helped them get to safety, and I've helped them find a path forward. So that is a significant part of my legacy. But that's just one part of the story. So why this podcast? Legacy Her Way was born out of desire to give voice to something that I've seen for years. Women are powerful legacy builders. We shape families. We build businesses. We break cycles. We pass down values. We hold it all together, often quietly, often unseen, overlooked, and not valued, or at least sometimes we feel like we're not valued. When I started writing, for publishing a few years ago, my first book was published in 2021. So when I started publishing writing for publishing purposes, it was to help women understand how God sees and values women and gives women value throughout Scripture so that women can live in the freedom of God's everlasting love. I want women to know that they are seen. They're seen by me, they're seen by others, and they're seen, more importantly, by God. And throughout this podcast, you're going to hear me talk about my faith. And you don't have to share that faith to listen. And some of my podcast guests will not share that faith. But I am a person of the Christian faith, and I will often talk about that and share that because that is significant. That's the most significant part of my legacy. But this podcast is here to see you, to honor you, and to equip you with the wisdom, stories, and tools to build a legacy that reflects who you are and what you value most. You'll hear from women who are doing just that. They're building their legacies in all kinds of ways. You're going to hear from entrepreneurs launching purpose-driven brands. You're going to hear from foster moms who are raising the next generation. You're going to hear from community leaders, writers, wealth builders, and everyday women who are showing up with intention. Many of these women saw a need and they built something to fill that need. They took educated risk to build their business or family, and in so doing, built a legacy. Some episodes will be interviews. Some will be solo episodes like this one. In those solo episodes, I'll dig into some planning, protecting your kids, building wealth, writing your story, navigating life's pivots, and staying on mission even when it's hard. I'll share stories of women who are in church, from church history or from the biblical history. I'm going to share stories of women who have built a legacy. But what does legacy really mean? We often think of legacy in terms of money or documents. So as the estate planning lawyer, I prepare wills and trusts. And so I know that people come to see me, and when they hear that term legacy, they're associating that with the estate planning documents, such as the last will, testament, or the trust. And, lawyers, estate planning lawyers, we advertise our services around legacy. Legacy's definition includes leaving gifts by wills or trusts. Absolutely. However, it also comprises anything transferred by or received from an ancestor or predecessor. Legacy is not just about leaving money and property to loved ones. I think there are 3 types of legacy. There's a legacy of your memory, and that is your story, your wisdom, your voice. Your hard-earned wisdom dies with you if you don't share it. So you want to share the wisdom of your memory. You want to share these hard-earned lessons through writings or recordings. You want to share it with others. Don't let the lessons you learn go to waste. You probably went through some messes. But those messes can help other people. So that's a legacy of your memory. You can take those lessons and help other people. There's also a legacy of your resources, and that is the assets. Those are your assets. That's your time. That's your gifts. That's your influence. And that kind of fits more along the lines of, doing your will, your trust, those types of documents. And then there's the legacy of your identity, who you are and how you showed up in this world. Legacy is what people remember when they say your name. It's how you made them feel. It's what you taught without even realizing it. And it's what you intentionally pass down, and sadly, sometimes unintentionally. So many of us live unintentionally because no one ever told us we had the right to live on purpose. This podcast is a way that I can help you reclaim that right and encourage you to reclaim that right. I, along with my guest, want you to know it's okay to pursue your dreams. Do the research and make educated decisions. You're going to hear many of our guests are going to say repeatedly, do your research, do your homework, make educated risks. But we don't want you to live with the regret of not even trying. I once heard someone ask this question, and it has stuck with me since I heard her ask it. What's the best that can happen? We often say, we think what's the worst thing that can happen? We're going to try this endeavor. We're going to try writing this book. We're going to try launching this business. What's the worst thing that happens? This person, this woman, and I can't remember who it was, but she challenged us. What's the best that can happen? And I want to challenge you. What is the best that can happen? So why this podcast? Why now? Oftentimes people will tell me they'll get to their estate planning one day. I'm going to launch this business one day. I'm going to start writing that book one day. I'm going to launch my photography business one day. Ladies, one day isn't a plan. Waiting for perfect timing is how stories never get told. Your legacy deserves more than just the not a plan one day. Your legacy deserves more than just good intentions. I've met with women in courtrooms, safe houses, law offices, And I've seen what happens when we wait too long to say what needs to be said, or protect the people we love, or when we wait too long to do the things that we dare dream to do. Because one day may be too late. If you're a woman who wants to live with intention, this podcast is for you. If you're raising children and wondering what kind of world you're sending them into, this podcast is for you. If you've been through something hard and you're still standing, this podcast is especially for you. This podcast is for women of faith, women of purpose, women with big dreams, and even bigger responsibilities. And I do want to back up and say, women of faith or no faith. This is a podcast it's not a quote-unquote faith-based podcast, but as I said, I will be sharing my faith, and many of my guests will be doing the same. But this podcast is for women of faith or no faith, women of purpose, women with big dreams, and women with even bigger responsibilities. It's for those who want to leave a mark without losing themselves. It's for those who are still figuring it out, but who know deep down they're here to build something meaningful. We don't all have it figured out. We are all figuring things out along the way. This podcast is to encourage and inspire you. What do you dream of pursuing? What have you overcome? Your wisdom and knowledge will die with you unless you preserve them. How will the memory of you be preserved? This is your story. Your life is your story. We all have a story to tell. It may be a story about our family history, business, perseverance through a traumatic situation, or something we're passionate about. Your wisdom and experiences are part of your legacy. A last will and testament distributes your assets, but how are you distributing your wisdom and life experiences? I've lived on the front lines. I've helped trafficking victims. I've navigated grief in my own family and guided others through hard lessons. The one lesson that keeps surfacing, we can't control everything, but we can prepare for what matters most. The difference between chaos and clarity is often one decision. That the time is now to set goals and move with intention and purpose. That one day is today. So in this podcast, we're going to explore some big questions. What does it mean to create legacy that reflects who you really are? How do you protect your children and provide peace of mind for your family? How do you share your story, even the hard parts, with power and purpose? How do you build wealth and pass it down in a way that aligns with your values? And we're going to do it together with honesty, with heart, and a whole lot of hope. You're going to meet some very incredible women, guests who have built businesses, healed from trauma, made some really bold moves, overcome silence, persevered through sheer grit and determination, taken leaps of faith, learned to set boundaries, found wealth in friendships, and defined success on their own terms. As I said, this is not a faith-based podcast, but I will talk about some of the women in the church in biblical history, something I studied while obtaining my master's in divinity. And as I said, guests are going to talk about their faith. Some of them do. But every episode is going to be thoughtful, practical, and full of heart. You're going to walk away feeling inspired and maybe a little more equipped to shape your own legacy, to pursue your own dreams. So, friend, thank you. Thank you for hitting play. Thank you for starting this journey with me. And if anything I said today resonated with you, go ahead and do me a favor and follow or subscribe to Legacy Her Way wherever you're listening. Share this episode with a friend, sister, or colleague who needs a little bit of encouragement. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. It helps other women find this space and feel seen. So, thank you for joining me on this debut podcast of Legacy Her Way. I hope that you enjoy the interviews with these women as much as I enjoyed interviewing them. They are some phenomenal women, as are you. Until next time, keep building boldly, loving deeply, and living your legacy your way.